Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English Pod. My name is Marco.
And I'm Erica.
And today we're going to be talking about a very special topic.
That's right. This topic was actually suggested by one of our listeners.
Exactly. So keep those comments coming because we want to create lessons that you need, that you want.
Exactly.
So what are we talking about today?
Today's lesson is about applying for a visa.
A very, very important topic.
Yes, and specifically, it's about a visa interview.
Exactly. As you all probably know, when you apply for a visa, especially for the US, you have an interview.
Yes.
Where you have to answer some questions.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So before we jump into the dialogue, let's take a look at vocabulary preview.
Vocabulary preview.
Okay, so let's talk about visa.
Right. A visa, it's not a credit card.
No, not Visa or MasterCard.
No. So a visa is an official document that you get in your passport that allows you to travel legally to a country.
Exactly. So with this document, you can go into a country. Okay, so we have different types of visas. Today, we're going to be talking about a B2 visa.
Right. A B2 visa is a tourist visa.
A tourist visa.
Yeah.
This is only for the United States. Other countries may have different classifications for their visas, but B2 is for the United States.
Right. So, Marco, we use a tourist visa when we want to be a tourist and just travel in the US. What about a resident visa?
Well, you can have a temporary resident visa. Like, for example, an F1.
Yep.
An F1 is for foreign exchange students who go and live in the States maybe for a year or do a MBA for 2 years or 3 years. So that's an F1 visa. You can also get a J1 visa, which is a temporary exchange visitor.
Okay.
So it could be to maybe do some temporary work for 2 or 3 months and then go back to your country.
So basically, a resident visa allows you to live in that country.
Yeah, you can live in that country legally for a determined time. Okay, so let's listen to our dialogue. Where are we going to be exactly?
In this dialogue, we're going to hear two people, a visa officer and a person who's applying for the visa. Now, the person who's applying for the visa has an accent, right?
Yes.
But this is really good practice for helping you to understand people with different accents.
Exactly. So let's listen to the dialogue and then we'll come back and explain all the great vocabulary.
So you're applying for a B2 visa. Where's your final destination and what's the purpose of your trip to the United States?
I'm going to visit my brother. He's just had a baby. He lives in Minneapolis.
And how long do you plan to remain in the United States?
I'll be here for approximately 3 weeks. So here's my return ticket for the 26th of March.
And who's sponsoring your trip?
My brother. Here. This is an invitation letter from him. I will stay with him and his family in their home.
All right. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Well, I own a house. Actually, I'm leaving my dog there with my neighbors. I have a car at home. And my job? I'm employed by Tornell as an engineer. Actually, I only have 3 weeks vacation, so I have to go back to work at the end of March.
And what evidence do you have that you are financially independent?
Well, I do have assets in my country. Like I said, I own a house and see, here's a bank statement showing my investments and my bank balance.
I'm sorry, sir. We cannot grant you a B2 visa at this time. Instead, you are granted a resident visa. Congratulations. You are the millionth person to apply for a visa. You win. Congratulations.
Yay!
All right, what a lucky guy. He applied for a tourist visa and now he's getting a resident visa.
Yeah, that's great. But does this really happen,
No.
Marco?
No, that would never happen at a consulate.
Okay, well, we can dream that this might happen for us.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a look at the words in language takeaway today.
Language takeaway.
All right, on language takeaway, we have sponsoring.
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 So, Erica, what does it mean to sponsor somebody?
When you sponsor somebody for a visa, you take care of them and make sure they have enough money.
Okay.
So you are the one who's responsible for all of their expenses and making sure they just have enough money.
Okay. So, for example, when I was 16, I made a trip to another country.
Yep.
And my parents were my sponsors.
So they took responsibility for your money.
Exactly. Okay. Let's look at our next word. Invitation letter.
Invitation letter.
Invitation letter.
Invitation letter.
Now, this is a really important part for a visa application.
Yes, very important.
What is an invitation letter?
Well, an invitation letter is a formal letter that a friend or a relative or maybe a business writes to ask you to come to their country.
Exactly. So you're being invited for a specific purpose to the United States.
Yeah, and you have to give this letter to the visa officer.
Okay. Invitation letter. Our next word. Ties.
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 Looks exactly like tie, like the one you wear in your suit.
Not quite the same though.
All right, so what are ties?
The ties you have to your country are the things that keep you attached to your country.
Okay.
That make sure that you will return to your country.
Okay, so what are some examples of ties?
Like maybe a house or a wife or a child or maybe some money in your bank account.
Okay.
Or a job even.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, a good way to think of this is imagine like a rope that's attached to you and tying you to your country, to your house, to your job, to your kids.
Okay, so you can't run away.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, that was clear, but let's listen to some more examples of how we would use ties.
Example 1.
I sold my house and closed my bank account. I don't have any more ties to my home country.
Example 2.
Alvin enjoyed being single. He wasn't ready for the ties of family life.
Example 3.
Diplomatic relations have improved, and the ties between the two countries are stronger.
All right, it's clear now. Let's look at our next word. Financially independent.
Financially independent.
Financially independent.
Financially independent.
So that means that you don't need anyone.
That you have enough money.
You have enough money for yourself.
Right. So you don't have to ask your parents to pay for your ticket or pay for your food or whatever.
Okay. And our last word for today. Assets.
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 Okay, so your assets are kind of like your ties.
Right. There are things of value that you own, things that are expensive that you own in your home country.
So it would be a house,
Yep.
a car,
Yep. Maybe stocks or investments.
Okay, so all of those things are your assets. Okay, so we've seen a lot of great words, and I think it's time for us to listen to our dialogue again. We're going to slow it down for you.
Yeah, this will help you understand it a little bit better.
So, you're applying for a B2 visa. Where is your final destination, and what is the purpose of your trip to the United States?
I'm going to visit my brother. He's just had a baby. He lives in Minneapolis.
And how long do you plan to remain in the United States?
I'll be here for approximately 3 weeks. See, here's my return ticket for the 26th of March.
And who is sponsoring your trip?
My brother. Here. This is an invitation letter from him. I'll stay with him and his family in their home.
All right. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Well, I own a house. Actually, I'm leaving my dog there with my neighbors. I have a car at home and my job. I'm employed by Tornell as an engineer. Actually, I only have 3 weeks vacation, so I have to go back to work at the end of March.
And what evidence do you have that you are financially independent?
Well, I do have assets in my country. Like I said, I own a house. And see, here's a bank statement showing my investments and my bank balance.
I'm sorry, sir. We cannot grant you a B2 visa at this time. Instead, You are granted a resident visa. Congratulations! You are the millionth person to apply for a visa. You win! Congratulations!
Yay!
Okay, today we're not going to do our regular toolkit like Fluency Builder or putting it together.
No, we're going to do something a little bit different today.
We're going to talk about the questions you will probably be asked at an interview for a U.S. visa.
Yes.
And the useful language that you can use to answer these questions in a good way. Okay, so let's take a look at our first question.
Where is your final destination, and what is the purpose of your trip to the United States? Where is your final destination, and what is the purpose of your trip to the United States?
So this is probably going to be the first question the interviewer is going to ask you.
Yeah, so Marco, I know you have a lot of experience with U.S. visas. How should we answer this question?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, right?
Right.
So if you're a tourist, you would say, I'm going on vacation to New York or anywhere. Also, if you're visiting a family member, like in our dialogue, you would say, oh, I'm going to visit my sister or my brother or my cousin. If you're applying for a business visa, then you would say, oh, I'm going to visit a company or etc.
Right.
So you just have to say why you are going to the States.
Now, is it important to be really specific?
Yeah, the more specific you are, it's probably better. So if you can name the state and the city where you're going, it's much better.
Okay. All right. Well, let's listen to our next question.
How long do you plan to remain in the United States? How long do you plan to remain in the United States?
Okay, so this is a really important question also because in your application, you have to put how long you plan to stay in the U.S.
Right.
It's a pretty straightforward answer. 2 months, 1 month, 3 weeks.
Right. But you just have to make sure that your answer matches
what's written in your application form.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, now let's take a look at our last question.
Tell me about the ties you have to your home country. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Well, I think this is maybe the most important question that they'll ask you, right?
Yeah, this is the most important question. This is what the interviewer is most interested in.
Okay, so why is he interested in this?
Because he has to be sure that you will not become an illegal immigrant to the United States.
So that you will return to your home country.
Exactly. He or she has to be convinced that you're going to return to your home country.
So how can you convince him?
Basically by demonstrating your ties.
So showing the things that will pull you back to your home country.
So if you take documents to support this, bank statements, maybe a copy of your mortgage.
Yep, like maybe your wedding certificate.
I don't know, even a letter from your office, from your job.
So that shows that you have to return to your work.
The more things you bring, the better, even though the interviewer might not ask for the documents.
Okay, it's better to be safe, right?
Exactly.
So come with a huge file full of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've had friends who've arrived to the embassy with a huge file of documents and weren't asked to show any of the documents.
Right.
But other interviewers will maybe ask for it. Okay, so now let's listen to the dialogue again.
And you'll hear how our traveler answers these questions.
So you're applying for a B2 visa. Where's your final destination, and what's the purpose of your trip to the United States?
I'm going to visit my brother. He's just had a baby. He lives in Minneapolis.
And how long do you plan to remain in the United States?
I'll be here for approximately 3 weeks. So here's my return ticket for the 26th of March.
And who's sponsoring your trip?
My brother. Here. This is an invitation letter from him. I will stay with him and his family in their home.
All right. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Well, I own a house. Actually, I'm leaving my dog there with my neighbors. I have a car at home. And my job? I'm employed by Tornell as an engineer. Actually, I only have 3 weeks vacation, so I have to go back to work at the end of March.
And what evidence do you have that you are financially independent?
Well, I do have assets in my country. Like I said, I own a house, and see, here's a bank statement showing my investments and my bank balance.
I'm sorry, sir. We cannot grant you a B2 visa at this time. Instead, you are granted a resident visa. Congratulations. You are the millionth person to apply for a visa. You win. Congratulations.
Yay!
Well, I hope this was a useful lesson for all of our listeners because I'm sure that in one point or another, in the future, you're going to apply for a visa. Mm-hmm. So now you know all the language that you need to more or less answer all these questions that you're going to be asked.
Yes. And Marco, I'm sure that people have already applied for visas for the US, right?
Probably, yeah.
And I want to hear from our users any stories that they have about applying for a visa.
Yeah, that would be great. I know that I have some stories to share on the comments board. Mm-hmm. And we want to hear your questions and comments and any suggestions.
Now more information about this podcast.
Hello and welcome to Easy English Talks podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and in today's episode, we are going to talk about how to apply for a visa. If you want to travel, study, or work in another country, getting a visa is one of the most important steps. We will learn new English words, common questions, useful expressions, and step-by-step instructions. Vocabulary. Let's begin with some useful words. Visa. This is official permission to enter a country. Example. I need a visa to travel to the US. Application. A form you fill out to request something. Example. She filled out the visa application online. Embassy. The office where you apply for a visa. Example. I went to the embassy for my interview. Documents. Papers like your passport, bank statement, or invitation letter. Interview. A short meeting where someone asks you questions. Approval. When your visa is accepted. Rejection. When your visa is denied. Processing time. How long it takes to get a decision. Requirements. What you need to apply. Sponsor. A person who supports your trip, usually with money. Steps to apply for a visa. Now, let's go step by step. Step 1. Choose the right visa. Ask yourself, are you traveling for tourism, study, or work? Step 2. Go to the embassy's official website. Every country has its own website. Read the instructions carefully. Step 3. Fill out the application form. Answer honestly. Don't make mistakes. Step 4. Collect your documents. This usually includes your passport, ID card, bank statement, photos, and sometimes a letter of invitation. Step 5. Pay the visa fee. Most embassies accept online payments. Step 6. Book an appointment. Many embassies require an in-person interview. Step 7. Prepare for the interview. Practice common questions. Dress well. Be polite. Step 8. Wait for the decision. This may take a few days or even weeks. Common interview questions. Let's practice some questions. Why do you want to go to this country? I want to study at a university there. Do you have any relatives there? No, I don't. Yes, my uncle lives there. How long will you stay? I will stay for 6 months. Who will pay for your trip? My parents are sponsoring me. What will you do after your visa expires? I will return to my country. Useful tips. Here are some helpful tips for success. Be honest. Never lie. Double check your documents. Practice your English speaking skills. Stay calm during the interview. Arrive on time for your appointment. Apply early to avoid delays. Summary and closing. To sum up, today, we talked about how to apply for a visa, learned useful words, steps of the process, interview questions, and tips to help you succeed. Thank you for listening to Easy English Talks podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please follow, share, and stay tuned for more. See you next time, and good luck with your visa application. Applying for a student visa to study in the United States.
There are several steps to getting a student visa to study in the United States. Recently, VOA Learning English spoke to Megan Mankarian-Stem about how to improve your chances of completing the process successfully. Mankarian-Stem is the Director of International Enrollment at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. She has worked at the Midwestern University for 6 years and advised international students for more than 10 years. She has many stories about her students having success in the U.S. But she also knows about the difficulties international students face even before getting to their first college class. In the last 2 years, some of the usual problems have increased because of the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, many U.S. embassies around the world are way behind in holding visa interviews. In Abuja, Nigeria, it will take 150 days for a student visa interview. Mankarian-Stem said, students often wait too long to apply for the F1 student visa. The F1 visa is one of 3 visas that permits students to come to the U.S. The others are J and M visas, but those are not for students coming for a long-term university study program. Visas with the letter M are for job training, and visas with the letter J are for short-term academic exchange programs. Mankarian-Stem said she recently spoke with a student from South Korea who wanted to come to Creighton. The student, however, had not yet scheduled a visa interview in Seoul. The waiting time right now for an interview there, she said, is over 4 weeks. Creighton's school year starts in less than 1 month.
So I had to say there's just no way that we could get you here in time for you to be able to be successful in your classes.
Mankarian-Stem said, students need to start the visa process early. You cannot afford to delay or procrastinate in any way, she said. She also advised students to work with the Education USA office in their home country and attend events where they can learn about the college and visa application process. Most students thinking about coming to school in the U.S. today will probably not be able to start school until 2023. Mankarian-Stem also said there are times when a student who has been accepted to study in the U.S. and who gets a visa interview is rejected by the U.S. Department of State. Here are some of the most common reasons students are rejected. They have not taken an English test, such as TOEFL, IELTS, or the Duolingo English test. They come from a country with a high number of fraudulent applications. They say that they have family members living in the U.S. They say they want to work in the U.S. when their studies are over. Students from countries such as Bangladesh, Ghana, Nepal, and Nigeria, she said, can be at risk for rejection. That is because others before them used false information in their applications. Mankarian STEM said, the visas are in place so that students can come to the U.S. for a school program and then return home immediately. If a visa officer thinks a student may try to stay longer than permitted, the student can be rejected. That can be a problem for students who want to get involved in the U.S. government program called Optional Practical Training, or OPT. OPT permits students to stay in the U.S. and work in their field of study for at least 1 year and possibly 3 after they get their degree. Mankarian STEM said she wants her students to have good answers ready during their interviews. She offers students the chance to practice and to speak with other international students who can advise them.
That way they're not surprised by these types of questions, and they're able to be honest, but also be very clear about what their intentions are.
Mankarian STEM said officers like herself are working to tell the U.S. State Department why students should not be rejected. For example, she noted that some schools may drop the student's English test requirement if the student has taken most of their classes in English or taken other tests that show their English skill. There are so many different other ways a student can prove their English language to us, she said. She also noted that international student advisors are telling student visa application reviewers that programs such as OPT are important. Students should be able to speak openly about their interest in OPT during visa interviews without fear of rejection. She said she and others are speaking with Education USA about making that point to others in the State Department. It is worth noting that countries with large numbers of students accepted into U.S. study programs will often have special F1 days. For example, the Financial Express newspaper of Bangladesh recently reported that the U.S. Embassy sometimes holds a Super Friday. On such days, embassy workers try to help hundreds of students in need of visas in order to start their studies. The most recent was on July 29th. I'm Dan Friedel.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.